My name is Madison. I'm 28, living by myself in a cramped apartment in Philadelphia. 3 weeks ago, I spent 4 hours driving back to my parents' place for what my mom proudly labels our early Christmas family dinner, even though it actually happens on Thanksgiving. She claimed it was easier that way. Nobody had work. Everyone could show up. I nearly turned the car around twice on the way there, but guilt can run a tank pretty well. So I arrived with a homemade pumpkin pie and a smile that never made it to my eyes. Dinner was loud and messy, football blasting on the TV, everyone talking over one another, pretending this was some Hallmark moment. Then, once the plates were gone, my mom stood up and clapped for attention like she was running an awards show. She grabbed a bag stuffed with wrapped gifts and started passing them out one by one around the table. My dad got a fresh golf shirt. My uncle got his favorite pricey wine. My sisters got sweet personalized stuff, little bracelets, and a spa certificate. People laughed, said thank you, hugged her. I waited, because obviously there had to be something for me too. When the bag was empty and she still hadn't even glanced my way, I finally asked, as casually as I could, "Is there one for me?" She didn't pause at all. "Be grateful you can sit here," she said, like she was reminding me I should be thankful just to be allowed in the room. My uncle snorted and added, "Be glad we still remember your name." And the whole table burst out laughing. My face burned, but I just nodded and said, "Good to know." No yelling, no crying, just that. I left early, drove back to Philadelphia in the dark, and decided something had to change. Because 2 weeks later, those same people who laughed at me were standing at my door, pounding on it and begging me to talk. And that was when the real story began. When I got back to Philadelphia that night, I dropped my keys on the counter, dumped the pumpkin pie in the trash, and sat on the kitchen floor staring at my phone. Part of me wanted to send a massive message in the family group chat spelling out exactly how they embarrassed me. But I knew the script. They'd say I was overreacting, that it was just a joke, that I should be grateful they invited me at all. So instead, I texted Haley, my best friend. She called me within 30 seconds. I told her everything, from the fake smiles to my mom's line about being grateful I could sit there, to my uncle's little "still remember your name" dig. There was a long pause on the line, then Haley said very evenly, "Len, that's not normal. That's not just rude. That's mean. They don't respect you at all." Hearing someone else say it out loud made something snap into place in my chest. I opened my banking app while we were still talking and started scrolling. Gym membership billed every month. Subscriptions running under my name that I hardly ever touched because I was non-stop working. Amazon Prime family account. Random event tickets, takeout charges, Uber rides, all those quick "can you cover this, I'll Venmo you later" situations that never actually came back to me. It finally clicked that for years I had quietly been the unseen financial support holding that tight little family together. They loved showing off online. They could sit around cracking jokes at my expense, but had zero issue letting my card stay saved like I was their personal sponsor. Haley said, "What if you just stopped paying? What if you let them feel what it's like to actually lose you?" The thought freaked me out and excited me at the same time. That weekend, I opened my laptop with a notebook and started writing everything down. Mom's yoga and gym memberships. Dad's streaming services and Prime, my little sister's last-minute theme park passes, concerts, gas money, every auto pay tied to my name and their comfort. Then I started shutting it down. Click cancel membership. Click disable auto renewal. Click remove card. With every confirmation email landing in my inbox, I felt a little lighter. I didn't send some dramatic message to the family group chat. I just let the systems they relied on quietly shut off. A few days later, my mom called during my lunch break. "No hello, no how are you? Just Madison, my gym card got declined this morning. Did something happen with the payment?" I swallowed hard and said, Yeah, I canceled it. You'll need to set it up under your own name. She sounded hurt. You know I go to those classes for my health. You know I rely on that. I replied, you also know what you said to me at dinner. I'm done paying for people who can laugh at me like that. She gasped like I'd slapped her. My dad called later that night because the streaming stopped working. It says the payment needs to be updated. He snapped. You must have messed something up. I said, I didn't mess anything up. I just stopped paying. You're adults. You can handle your own bills. He went quiet, then fired back. Family takes care of each other, Madison. I said, exactly. That goes both ways. After that, the group chat exploded. Little passive-aggressive comments about how some people forget their roots and how money isn't everything, but some folks think it is. I muted the chat. I decided I wasn't going home for Christmas, no matter how many guilt trips they tried. For the first time in my life, I chose not to play the part they had written for me. I assumed they'd pout, maybe talk trash about me at the country club, and eventually move on. I underestimated how much they relied on me, not just for money, but for control. Because the more their subscriptions and comforts fell apart, the more frantic they became. And that's how I ended up with my entire family on the other side of my apartment door, banging and yelling to be let in. The first real wave hit a few days after I shut everything down. I was sitting at my desk trying to lock in on a campaign brief, rereading the same line like 5 times, when my phone started blowing up nonstop. At first it was just the family group chat going off like an emergency alert. My mom sent a massive paragraph about how some people forget who raised them and how deeply wounded she was that I would attack her health by canceling the gym. She framed it like I'd taken away prescription meds, not canceled a membership that was being charged to my card. There was a whole part about how yoga was the only thing keeping her sane, like her mental health was somehow my personal responsibility. My dad jumped in right after with his usual speech about sacrifice and family obligation. Tossing in that classic, you wouldn't have your fancy job in Philadelphia if it weren't for us, which he pulled out anytime money was mentioned. Like my degree and career were line items on a tab I still owed. Then my sisters chimed in with emojis and side remarks. One of them wrote, imagine choosing Netflix over your own mom, which was wild considering I'd canceled Netflix too, and they were the ones using it way more than I ever had. Another sent, you've changed so much. You used to be nice, followed by a crying emoji and a broken heart. Same script as always, just louder and broadcast to everyone. I stared at the chat for a second, my chest getting tight, then muted it again and set my phone face down on my desk. I could still feel it buzzing every few seconds, like the phone itself was stressed. 10 minutes later, Haley texted me screenshots from Instagram. You seeing this? She said. My younger sister had posted a black background with white text saying, some people will cut off their own blood over money. Remember who was there before your paycheck, with a broken heart emoji and praying hands. She didn't tag me, but she didn't have to. Half our extended family follows both of us. My mom commented underneath, so sad but true. Love you, baby. Some people lose their way. Then cousins piled on with family over everything, money can't buy loyalty, and people change when they move to the city. Someone even wrote you guys are the strongest family I know, which might have been funny if it didn't hurt so much. My stomach knotted as I scrolled. They were rewriting the narrative in real time, casting themselves as victims and me as some heartless villain who ditched them for money and skyline views. No one mentioned my mom telling me I should be grateful I was even allowed to sit there, or my uncle turning my name into a joke. Nobody brought up the years of can you just put it on your card moments that suddenly didn't exist. I shut off my phone, put it down, and stayed there for a bit, letting the low buzz of the office fill the room along with the clacking of everyone else's keyboards. It hit me that my entire life I'd been scared to death of being labeled ungrateful. So I kept giving and giving to prove I wasn't. And now, the first time I finally said no, that was the exact word they threw at me. Anyway, that night, instead of breaking down like I usually did, I pulled out my laptop at the kitchen table and opened my banking app again. If they wanted to preach about sacrifice and responsibility, cool. We could talk numbers, the one language that doesn't respond to guilt or emotional pressure. I pulled up 5 full years of transactions and started sorting through them. Gym memberships, yoga studios, streaming subscriptions, Amazon Prime family plan, theme park passes with notes like for Harper and Friends concert tickets where the charge hit my account at 11:59 p.m. after a panicked, "I'll Venmo you, I swear." Emergency car fixes my uncle couldn't cover that somehow ended up on my card with an "I'll pay you back once my bonus comes." It never did. Restaurant tabs where I grabbed the bill because you make more than us. It's not a big deal, said like a joke, but taken very seriously. It hurt and felt weirdly good at the same time. Every line I highlighted brought back the exact conversation tied to it, the exact moment I swallowed my frustration and smiled instead. I dumped everything into a spreadsheet, added dates and quick notes, color-coded the categories just to stay sane, and watched the total rise and rise until I leaned back and just stared. This wasn't a handful of kind gestures. This was a habit. This was years of me acting as the fallback whenever someone forgot their wallet or couldn't make it to payday or just needed help. That's when I realized that to them, my money was basically theirs, something they felt entitled to because of family and shared history. I opened a new email and addressed it to my parents and both sisters. The subject line read, "Since we're talking about who owes what," I paused there for a second, my finger hovering, then started typing. In the message, I wrote plainly that I knew what they'd done for me growing up, that I appreciated having a home and food and school, that I wasn't acting like I raised myself. But I also wrote that the idea that I somehow owed them unlimited financial support and endless patience for the rest of my life wasn't true and wasn't healthy. Then I pasted in the spreadsheet total with a short breakdown underneath listing the categories. I didn't call them thieves. I didn't demand immediate repayment like some debt collector. I just wrote, "If you want to keep saying I'm ungrateful and selfish because I stopped paying, please look at this and ask yourself who has actually been taking care of whom." A moment later, my phone lit up with my mom calling. Then the buzzer sounded again, longer this time, like someone was pressing and holding it down. My stomach sank. I stepped over to the intercom and tapped the button just enough to catch the noise from downstairs. That's when my mom's voice carried up the stairwell, sharp and loud. "Madison, we know you're home. Buzz us in." There was this forced, upbeat tone, like she was putting on a show in case anyone was listening, but underneath it was straight up rage. I stood there frozen for a beat, then quietly checked the hallway through the peephole. A few minutes later, I saw them. My mom and dad standing right outside my apartment, clearly having charmed another tenant into letting them inside the building. My mom was clutching a glossy red gift bag, tissue paper spilling out like a holiday ad. My dad had a couple of smaller bags looped around his wrist. My phone started ringing again on the table behind me. I ignored it. My mom knocked gently at first. 3 soft taps. "Lauren, honey, open up. We brought you something. We just want to talk before Christmas." She said it loud enough for anyone on the floor to hear. I took a breath, stepped closer, but didn't unlock the door. "I don't want to talk right now," I said through the door. "You need to leave." Her tone flipped instantly. The fake sweetness shattered. She knocked harder, the bags crinkling. "We drove 4 hours to be here, Madison. 4 hours. The least you can do is open the door and talk to your own parents." My dad jumped in, his voice already irritated. "This is ridiculous. We're not doing this through a door. Open it." I repeated, "No, you don't get to humiliate me, mock me, and then show up with gift bags like that fixes anything." You need to go. There was a pause, then the knocking turned into full-on pounding. My mom's voice went higher, shaky and dramatic. Do you even hear yourself? This is what that city has done to you. You think you're better than us now? You cancel plans without warning. You send that disgusting email and now you can't even face us. She started sniffling loudly. Our family is falling apart and you don't even care. She sobbed. My dad dropped his voice, but the anger was still there. This is about respect, Madison. You owed us a chance to talk face to face. Man up and open the door. I almost laughed at man up, considering this whole thing started because they made fun of me in front of everyone like I was a kid. Instead, I said, respect goes both ways. Standing outside my place trying to force a conversation I already said no to is not respect. My phone buzzed in my hand. It was my younger sister calling. When I didn't answer, she immediately sent a text. They're outside your door. Just open it. Don't make this worse. Mom's losing it, I texted back. They came by without asking. That's on them. A moment later, she responded, you're being heartless. They brought you Christmas gifts to make things right. Outside the door, my mom clearly leaned into that story. She raised her voice again and said, we brought you presents, Madison. We didn't forget about you. We're trying. Isn't this what you wanted? Attention. It was almost laughable how she spun it. I imagined what was inside those bags. Probably a plain sweater off a sale rack. Maybe a candle, something they could later point at and say, we tried, and she threw it back at us. I didn't ask for any of this. Gifts don't fix anything, I said. You never even apologized for what you said, for laughing at me in front of everyone. There was a pause. Then my mom snapped. Oh my God, are you still stuck on that? It was a joke, Madison. A joke. Normal people can handle a joke at dinner. My dad chimed in, you're taking one comment and blowing it up, then punishing the entire family for it. That was when I realized there was nothing waiting for me on the other side of that door. Not now. Not like this. I grabbed my phone again and texted my mom. You have 10 minutes to leave or I'm calling building security. Out loud, I said, you need to leave. I'm serious. The knocking stopped for a second, then came back even harder, my mom's voice cracking. We need to talk. Open the door. Please don't do this to us. Don't do this to your mother. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears, but I didn't move toward the lock. I just stood there staring at the doorknob, repeating to myself, you're allowed to say no. You're allowed to say no. After about 20 minutes of banging, crying, begging, and my dad muttering that I was acting crazy, they finally left. A neighbor down the hall emailed me later that night through the building portal, politely asking if everything was okay and mentioning the extremely loud scene outside my door. I sat on my couch afterward, shaking, and opened a blank note on my phone. I started typing exactly what had happened, every word they said, every feeling tightening in my chest. I didn't want them gaslighting me later into thinking I made it up. The more I wrote, the clearer it became that this wasn't just about one dinner or a couple of subscriptions. This was about control. They weren't used to me having boundaries. And they were not handling the word no well at all. I thought the worst was over once they drove away that day. I told myself they'd cool down, complain about me to their friends, and then back off. I was wrong. That visit was only the beginning. The next time they came back, they'd bring more than gift bags and guilt, and they'd show me just how far they were willing to go to pull me back into the role they needed me to play. After the gift bags showed up outside my door, I honestly thought they'd chill out. For a couple days, things were almost calm. The family group chat slowed to vague quotes about forgiveness and praying for people who lose their way. I muted it, buried myself in work, grabbed coffee with Haley, tried to sleep without my mom's voice repeating "Be grateful you can sit here" in my head. I convinced myself the worst had passed. It hadn't. The calls started again. First from my parents' numbers, which I sent straight to voicemail. My mom cried about not sleeping, her blood pressure, how the doctor said stress like this could kill her, and asked if that's what I wanted. My dad's messages were colder. I was tearing the family apart. I owed them a conversation because they raised me. When I stopped answering, they switched to random local numbers. I picked one up, thinking it was work, and my mom said, "So, you do still know how to answer a phone?" like she'd caught me lying. I hung up. Then my Uncle Brian jumped in, leaving voicemails about how I couldn't cancel my family like a subscription, and how one day I'd need them. Online. My sister posted another sad TikTok about being abandoned by your own sibling who chooses money and strangers over the people who were there from day one. No name, but the caption, "Sometimes blood hurts more than strangers," made it obvious. Strangers flooded her comments with support, telling her to cut off toxic people. Meanwhile, the fallout from my canceled payments landed. My mom left a frantic voicemail about the gym needing a new card and sign-up fee, saying yoga was the only thing keeping her calm and asking how I could do that to her. A cousin told me my dad was complaining at the golf club about ungrateful kids who treat parents like banks. One night, I opened my spreadsheet again and added a column for behavior. Calls, guilt trips, TikToks, surprise visits. Seeing it all laid out made it impossible to pretend this was temporary. It was a system and I'd stopped playing along. A few days before Christmas, it went from digital back to physical. I came home with groceries, saw my parents' car outside, and felt my stomach sink. When I turned onto my floor, my mom, my dad, and my Uncle Brian were standing in front of my apartment like a wall. "There she is," my mom said loudly. "Do you feel proud calling security on your own parents?" I set the bag down, kept my keys in my hand. "You're not supposed to be here. You need to leave." My dad said they weren't leaving, that they'd driven all that way to talk in person, and I owed them that. My mom kept going about how they were trying to save the family while I hid in my little box and treated them like parasites. My uncle leaned on the wall, smirking, asking if I really thought my neighbors cared about me more than my own blood. "You don't just cancel blood," he said. "I told them blood didn't give them the right to show up after I told them to stop." My mom sneered, said nobody had laid hands on me, claimed I was twisting things and painting them as abusive just to feel righteous. My dad moved closer until the door pressed into my back. "Here's what's going to happen," he said, "you're coming home with us for Christmas. This nonsense stops now." My voice trembled, but I answered, "No, I've told you to leave. You're harassing me." My mom slammed her hand into the doorframe next to my head so hard I flinched, shouting about everything they had ever done for me and how I owed them. My uncle noticed me recoil, smirked, and set his hand on my shoulder, trying to shove me away from the lock. Something inside me went completely still. I brushed his hand off and said clearly and loudly, "Do not touch me again." I took out my phone, called building security, and said, "My family is here again." I told them to leave. They refuse. One of them put his hands on me. "I need someone up here." They stared at me like I had pulled a fire alarm. The guard came upstairs, heard both sides, then looked at them and said, "She lives here. She's asked you to leave. You can't keep showing up here and making scenes. If you come back, we'll have to involve the police." He escorted them to the elevator while my mom cried and my dad muttered about ungrateful children. My uncle shot me one last look and whispered, "You're going to regret this." Later, management slid a notice under my door documenting the incident and stating they were not allowed back without permission. that continued visits could result in a no trespass order and police involvement. For the first time, there was something in writing saying this wasn't just family drama. Other people witnessed it. Other people were willing to name it for what it was. I wanted to believe that warning would be enough to make them stop. But people who thrive on control rarely give it up over a single piece of paper. And the next time they came, it wouldn't just be security stepping in. A few days before Christmas, I finally began to relax. Security had filed their report. My parents and my uncle had already been escorted out once, and my phone was silent for the first time in weeks. I blocked a few numbers, muted the family group chat, buried myself in year-end projects, and held on to the plan of spending Christmas Eve with Haley, eating takeout, and watching dumb movies. I told myself it was over. I was wrong. One afternoon, I was walking up the stairs with groceries when I heard it. My last name echoing through the stairwell, my mother's voice sharp and too loud. "She's on this floor." "I know she is. Madison, get out here right now." My stomach dropped. When I turned the corner onto my floor, they were there again. My mom, my dad, and my Uncle Brian standing in the middle of the hallway outside my door like they owned the place. My mom spun toward me. "There you are," she snapped. "Do you feel powerful now calling security on your own parents?" My dad stood rigid, jaw tight. My uncle leaned against the wall like this was just entertainment to him. I dropped my grocery bag and kept my keys clenched in my fist. "You're not supposed to be here," I said. "You need to leave." "We're not leaving," my dad replied. "Not until you stop acting like a stranger and talk to us like an adult. We drove all this way before Christmas to try and fix this." My mom jumped in, her voice climbing so the whole hallway could hear. "We're still fighting for this family," she said. "You cut us off. You humiliate us with that email. You call security on us, and you can't even look us in the eye. We gave you everything." I noticed doors along the hall start to crack open. My uncle pushed off the wall and moved closer. "You think these people care about you more than we do?" he said, jerking his head toward the other apartments. "When your big city life falls apart, you think they'll take you in? Blood is blood, kid. You don't just cancel that." Something inside me locked up. "Blood isn't a free pass," I said. "It doesn't give you the right to show up at my place after I told you to stop. It doesn't give you permission to yell at me, box me in, or put your hands on me." My mom snorted. "No one put their hands on you," she snapped. "You spin everything to make us look like monsters. Security said there was nothing on camera last time. You've decided we're abusive so you can feel justified." Out of the corner of my eye, I saw my older neighbor down the hall standing in her doorway with her phone raised, recording again. Our eyes met. She gave me a small nod that said, "I see this, and I'm not pretending I don't." My dad stepped closer until my back hit my own door. His voice went low. "Here's what's going to happen," he said. "You're going to pack a bag. You're coming home with us for Christmas, and we're going to sit down and work this out. This stunt with the cancellations and getting security involved ends now." My hands were shaking, but my voice stayed steady. "No, I'm not going anywhere with you. I've told you to leave me alone. You keep coming back. You are harassing me." My mom slammed her hand against the door beside my head with a sharp crack that made me flinch. "Harassing?" she hissed. "We gave you life. You wouldn't have this apartment, this job, anything without us. You owe us respect. You owe us your presence at Christmas. You owe us more than this." My uncle saw me flinch and grinned. "You call this harassment?" he said, then set his hand on my shoulder and shoved just enough to pull me away from the lock. It wasn't a punch, but it was a message. "We still control you. Something in me went completely still. I knocked his hand away and said loudly, "Do not touch me again." Before he could snap back, my neighbor's voice cut through the hallway. "I'm calling the police," she said clearly. "This is the second time you've done this. She told you to get out. I'm filming everything." For a moment, the whole hallway locked up. My mom spun fast and shouted, "This doesn't concern you. This is family." My neighbor stayed calm. "You made it concern us. When you started screaming out here," she said, and I could hear sirens somewhere far off, getting louder by the second. My mom faced me again, slipping into that cracked, guilt-tripping voice I knew by heart. "Madison, don't do this," she begged. "Say it's okay. Tell her not to call. Do you want your uncle arrested? Do you want your mother collapsing right here on the floor? Is that what you want for Christmas?" My chest went tight. For a split second, that old habit kicked in: fix it, smooth it over, say sorry just to end it. Then I remembered the spreadsheet, the dinner table, the way they laughed while I sat there on fire inside. I breathed in. "I want you to leave." I said, "If you didn't want the police involved, you shouldn't have come back." A few minutes later, 2 cops came down the hall, clocking everything. My parents and uncle, my neighbor holding her phone, me pinned to my door with my keys dug into my palm. One cop looked straight at me. "Do you live here?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "They're my family. I've asked them to leave multiple times. Security already escorted them out once. They keep coming back. They've put their hands on me. I don't feel safe." My voice shook, but I said it. The other cop talked to my neighbor, who showed them a video of my uncle gripping my shoulder and my mom slamming her hand into the wall next to my head. That was enough. The first cop turned to my family, his voice sharp. "You need to leave the property now," he said. "You've been warned before. This is harassment. You don't get to show up here and trap her just because you're related. If you come back or contact her like this again, she can file for a restraining order and press charges." My mom started crying about worried parents. My dad argued about his rights as my father. My uncle grumbled about weak cops and disrespectful kids. The cops didn't care. They pulled my uncle aside, checked his ID, and wrote him a citation, spelling out exactly what it meant. He stood there flushed while the officer told him he was officially on record for harassing his niece. Watching that man, the one who had mocked me my whole life, stare at the floor while someone in charge told him he was the problem, changed something in me. For once, I wasn't the one getting dragged and embarrassed in front of everyone. As they were being escorted to the elevator, my mom grabbed her chest and said she felt lightheaded, that the pressure was too much. One of the officers suggested calling an ambulance. My dad said he'd drive her to the hospital himself. Later, I found out her blood pressure had shot up and she ended up spending the night in the ER. I also heard my dad was livid about the hospital charges and the ticket. That my uncle suddenly stopped running his mouth at the bar where he used to brag about our flawless family. After they were gone, building management slid a notice under my door confirming what happened, stating that my parents and uncle were banned from the property without prior approval and reminding me I could file a restraining order if I wanted. A cousin texted me, "People are talking. I saw a video of your mom and uncle yelling in your hallway. You okay?" I stared at the message for a moment, then answered, "I'm okay. Better than before." For the first time, the consequences of their behavior were landing on them instead of me. And as Christmas passed in total silence between us, that silence felt less like punishment and more like space. Space where I could finally start imagining a life that wasn't built around managing their chaos. In the weeks after Christmas, the quiet from my family felt unreal. I kept waiting for another blow-up, another surprise visit, another flood of guilt-soaked texts, but nothing came. No Merry Christmas, no Happy New Year, not even a passive-aggressive quote with my name hidden between the lines. At first, it felt like standing in a room right after a fire alarm shuts off. My body stayed tense, waiting for noise that never came. Slowly, it began to feel like something else, space. Through cousins and shared friends, I heard what was going on back home. My mom had follow-ups after that ER trip. Her doctor told her flat out that if she didn't get her stress under control, she was setting herself up for serious trouble. Without my money quietly covering the extras, she had to scale back on her gym membership and some of the social stuff she loved to brag about. She asked a younger coworker to help her download budgeting and finance apps and understand how autopay actually worked. My dad had to call the streaming and subscription companies himself, sit on hold, reset passwords, and for once figure things out without just saying, "Ask Madison." He complained non-stop about the hospital bill from my mom's ER night and my uncle's citation. But this time, there was no one left to shove those costs onto. My Uncle Brian's lovable funny guy reputation took a hit too. People at his bar and golf club had seen or at least heard about the video of him grabbing my shoulder in my hallway. The cops were writing his name on a ticket. He didn't end up in jail, but the fallout stuck. It's tough to keep the fun uncle image when everyone knows you're the guy your own niece called the police on. My sisters went quieter online. Less concert selfies and spur-of-the-moment trips. More posts about extra shifts and hustling toward goals. When I stopped being their unseen safety net, they had to support themselves. That was the moment it clicked for me. Setting that boundary didn't just make me mature. It pushed all of us to. After the rush wore off, I hit a slump. With no fresh chaos to distract me, all the old stuff resurfaced. The jokes that weren't really jokes. The times I covered the tab and buried my anger. The years I thought keeping the peace was my responsibility. I finally scheduled a therapist instead of just saying I would. In our first session, she asked, "When did you learn that your role in the family was to fix everything?" I didn't have a clean answer, but it stuck with me. I also joined an online support group and a subreddit packed with stories that felt way too familiar. Parents who used guilt like a weapon, relatives who treated family like a leash, siblings who only checked in when they needed something. Reading the comments, I saw words I'd never allowed myself to use for my own situation. Manipulation, emotional abuse, financial exploitation. It didn't rewrite the past, but it changed how I judged myself for finally stepping away. Months later, my mom sent a brief email. No subject, just "I'm sorry things got so bad between us. I don't agree with how you've handled everything, but I miss you. I hope you're okay." It wasn't the apology I wanted, but it was something. I didn't reply right away. When I did, I kept it straightforward. I told her I was okay, that I hoped she was taking her health seriously, and that if we ever talked again, it would need to be different. No yelling, no guilt, no pretending Thanksgiving was just a joke. I said I was open to a conversation someday, ideally with a therapist there, but I wouldn't go back to footing the bill and acting grateful to be there. Hitting send didn't feel like reopening the door. It felt like locking it on the old version of us and leaving only a small guarded window. I don't know exactly what the future holds for my family. Maybe we'll build something smaller and healthier. Maybe we'll stay low contact forever. What I do know is this. For the first time, my peace doesn't hinge on their moods. I pay my own bills for me. I choose to spend holidays with people who don't turn me into a joke and label it love. I've stopped judging my value by how helpful I am to the people who brought me up. If there's one takeaway from all of this, it's that family isn't a free license to treat you poorly. Love without respect is just control wearing the mask of care. Boundaries aren't betrayal. They're self-respect put into motion. And sometimes the sweetest revenge isn't slamming a door. It's choosing to leave. Allowing people to finally feel the weight of their own actions and creating a life where you're not thankful just to be tolerated, but truly proud to stand on your own. Have you ever had to pick your peace over your family's approval? And if you haven't yet, what line would they need to cross for you to finally say enough is enough?